I was restoring a 16th century Madonna when my world started to crumble. My fingers trembled against the canvas while outside my studio, thunder crashed like my life was some damn cliché. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Michelle Bennett, meticulously bringing back the dead layers of someone else's creation while my own existence was peeling away at the edges. 10 minutes to salvage 3 centuries of history, I muttered, dabbing solvent on a cotton swab. The Corsini Gallery deadline loomed tomorrow, and this restoration would either cement my reputation or destroy it. The painting's Madonna stared back with knowing eyes as I worked, judging me with that serene half-smile. She knew something I didn't. My phone buzzed. 5th call from the gallery today. I silenced it and inhaled the sharp scent of turpentine that perpetually clung to my clothes, my hair, probably my soul at this point. That's when my alarm blared. Shit. Driving school. The one thing my therapist had insisted would ground me in the present after my last breakdown. As if learning to parallel park could fix whatever was broken inside me. The DMV driving school smelled like desperation and artificial pine. I was 32 and surrounded by teenagers, clutching my paperwork like it might shield me from their judgment. The instructor, a balding man with coffee-stained teeth, paired us off for practice exercises. "Bennett, you're with Johnson," he called out, barely looking up from his clipboard. I turned toward the name and found myself facing a woman about my age, maybe younger. Black hair cut in a precise shoulder-length bob, brown eyes that didn't flinch when they met mine. She wore a crisp white blouse tucked into navy slacks, the kind of put-together I'd forgotten existed outside of magazine pages. "Anna Johnson," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Mine was stained with cadmium red and smelled of solvent. "Michelle," I replied, suddenly aware of my paint-splattered jeans and the mismatched socks I'd thrown on this morning during my rush out the door. We headed toward the practice car, a battered Toyota that had survived countless student drivers. Anna slid behind the wheel first. "Insurance claims adjuster," she said, adjusting the mirrors with precise movements. "You?" "Art restoration specialist," I answered, watching her hands. They were steady, dependable. Mine hadn't stopped shaking for weeks. "So you fix beautiful broken things," she said, not as a question but an observation. "Try to," I replied. "Sometimes they're too far gone." When it was my turn to drive, I reversed directly into an orange cone, then overcorrected and nearly sideswiped a parked car. My face burned as the instructor made notes on his clipboard. "Relax your grip," Anna said quietly. "You're strangling the wheel." I loosened my white-knuckled hands and caught a whiff of something unexpected, vanilla and amber. Her perfume, subtle but grounding against the backdrop of gasoline and my own anxiety. "I'm usually better with my hands," I said, then immediately regretted the unintended innuendo. Anna's laugh was soft but genuine. "I bet you are." By the end of the session, I'd managed to park between the lines, a minor miracle. As we walked back to the building, our shoulders brushed. A jolt of something I hadn't felt in years shot through me. "Same time Thursday?" she asked. "If I survive until then," I said, thinking of the Madonna's impossible deadline. Anna tilted her head, studying me with those unflinching brown eyes. "You know, I specialize in damaged goods." "Professional hazard?" "Professional interest," she corrected, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. Later that night, back in my studio, I found myself thinking about Anna's steady hands while I worked on the Madonna's face. For the first time in weeks, my own fingers didn't shake. The restoration flowed, colors blending seamlessly, centuries of damage yielding to my touch. I didn't know then that Anna Johnson would become both my anchor and my undoing. I didn't know that her professional interest in damaged goods would extend far beyond insurance claims, and I certainly didn't know that soon. Time itself would betray me, slipping through my fingers like water, leaving me clinging to moments I couldn't trust and a woman I barely knew. I finished the Madonna restoration with minutes to spare, collapsed onto my studio couch and slept for 14 hours straight. When I finally peeled my eyelids open, sunlight was streaming through the skylights, illuminating dust motes dancing above half-finished canvases. My phone showed 3 missed calls from the gallery, all good news. The restoration had been deemed masterful. I should have felt elated. Instead, I felt hollow. Driving school was something to look forward to now. Anna's calm presence had become an anchor in my scattered week. I'd catch myself thinking about her steady hands during client meetings, remembering the subtle scent of her perfume while mixing pigments. "You've got paint on your cheek," Anna said when we met for our third session. Before I could react, her thumb brushed against my skin, firm but gentle. The casual intimacy caught me off guard. "Hazard of the trade," I managed, my voice embarrassingly unsteady. After successfully parallel parking, I found myself saying, "You should see my studio sometime, since you deal with art insurance." The words tumbled out before I could analyze my own intentions. Was this professional networking or something else? Anna's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I'd like that. Professional interest, of course." "Of course," I echoed, ignoring the flutter in my chest. 2 days later, she stood in my studio space, examining my restoration setup with genuine curiosity. Afternoon light filtered through the industrial windows, casting her in a golden glow that made her look like she belonged in a painting herself. "So this is where the magic happens," Anna said, running her fingers along my workbench. "I usually only see the damaged pieces after disaster strikes. And I only see them after they've been deemed worth saving," I replied, suddenly self-conscious about the organized chaos around us. Tubes of paint, jars of solvents, specialized tools arranged in patterns that made sense only to me. "How do you decide what's worth salvaging?" she asked, picking up a fine-tipped brush. The question hit deeper than she could have known. "It's not always my call. Some clients will pay anything to restore what they've lost. Others cut their losses and move on." Anna nodded, understanding passing between us. "In my line of work, I determine monetary value, but that rarely captures what something's really worth to someone." I showed her a small portrait I was currently restoring, a woman from the 1920s, her face damaged by water and time. "Sometimes I wonder about their stories. Who loved them? Who forgot them?" Anna stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine. "Maybe that's why we're drawn to damaged things, the stories they keep." There was something unspoken in her words that made my skin prickle with awareness. I cleared my throat. "Coffee?" "There's a place around the corner." The cafe was dimly lit, with mismatched furniture and jazz playing softly. We claimed a table by the window. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, skipping from art to insurance to childhood dreams. Anna had wanted to be a detective. I had wanted to be a painter before discovering I was better at fixing others' work than creating my own. "Restoration is creation," Anna argued. "You're breathing life back into something dying." The way she looked at me made me wonder if she was still talking about art. When our hands brushed, reaching for the sugar, neither of us pulled away immediately. The contact lingered, deliberate, sending warmth up my arm. Her fingers were cool against mine. I found myself studying the curve of her wrist, the faint blue veins visible beneath her skin. "I should get going," she said eventually, though she made no move to stand. "Right," I agreed, equally motionless. Outside the cafe, the evening had turned cool. Street lamps flickered on, casting pools of light on the sidewalk. We stood facing each other, that strange electricity still buzzing between us. "Thank you for showing me your work," Anna said, extending her hand formally, as if we were concluding a business meeting. I took it, but instead of shaking, I just held it. Her palm against mine felt more intimate than any kiss. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain she could hear it. When she finally pulled away, her fingertips grazed my palm in a touch so deliberate it couldn't be accidental. "See you at driving school," she said with a small smile. I watched her walk away, her figure gradually dissolving into the evening crowd. My hand still tingled where she had touched it, and something unfamiliar expanded in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Something that frightened and exhilarated me in equal measure. What I didn't know then was how quickly I was already falling, or that soon time itself would become my enemy, making every moment with her both precious and terrifyingly unreliable. It started on a Tuesday. I was restoring a small degas, lost in the delicate brushwork, when my phone alarm startled me. 6 o'clock already? Impossible. I'd started working right after lunch, around 1. 5 hours couldn't have passed that quickly. I called the gallery to reschedule my meeting, apologizing profusely. Marissa, the curator, sounded confused. "Michelle, we waited for you yesterday. I've been calling." "Yesterday?" I checked my phone. "Wednesday, not Tuesday." Somehow I'd lost an entire day without noticing. I mumbled something about migraines and emergency work and hung up, heart racing. Had I blacked out? Worked through the night? I couldn't remember sleeping, eating, anything. The incident shook me enough that I mentioned it to Anna during our next driving lesson. Ever lose track of time completely? I asked as she efficiently parallel parked between two cones. She glanced at me, eyebrow raised. Like, hyper-focusing? Sure. No, I mean. I hesitated, suddenly aware how crazy it sounded. Never mind. But by the following week, it had happened twice more. I showed up at the dentist's office a day late. I missed a supplier meeting entirely. And most disturbing, I found half-eaten meals I had no memory of preparing. After finishing our final driving test, Anna suggested celebratory drinks. The bar was noisy, crowded with Friday night revelers, but we found a quiet corner booth. You seem distracted, she said, studying me over her glass of wine. Everything okay? The concern in her eyes broke something loose inside me. I told her everything, the lost day, the missed appointments, the growing sense that my grip on reality was slipping. I expected her to make excuses to leave, to back away slowly from the crazy art restorer. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened the calendar app. When's your next deadline? She asked. Thursday. Johnson Collection. Why? And therapy appointments? I blinked, surprised she remembered I mentioned seeing someone. Monday's at 4. She nodded, fingers tapping efficiently. I'm setting up alerts for you, not just one, but cascading reminders, and different sounds for different types of appointments. I watched, bewildered, as she created an entire organizational system for me in minutes. Why are you doing this? Her eyes met mine, steady and clear. Because you need help and I'm good at organizing chaos. It's literally my job. Something warm unfurled in my chest. When was the last time someone had simply helped me without questioning, without demanding explanations? The system worked briefly. The specialized alerts kept me tethered to the calendar, to reality. But the time slips worsened. I'd find myself standing in my kitchen with no memory of how I got there. I'd look at the clock, and 2 hours had vanished while I was brushing my teeth. Anna started texting me throughout the day. Simple messages. It's 2 p.m. Tuesday. Drink water. Don't forget dinner. It's 7 p.m. Somehow, her voice, even digital, became my anchor. Then came the night that terrified me beyond anything I'd experienced. I was working on a complex restoration, completely absorbed in matching the exact shade of cerulean for a damaged sky. The piece was challenging but not urgent. I started around 8, planning to work for an hour, then get some actual sleep. The next thing I knew, my phone was ringing. Anna's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my mouth dry. Hey, where are you? Her voice sounded concerned. We were supposed to meet for lunch 20 minutes ago. Lunch? I croaked, looking around. Sunlight streamed through the windows. My studio clock read 12:25. What day is it? A pause. Wednesday. I'd started working Tuesday night. 14 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. I'd worked through the night without eating, drinking, or even noticing the sunrise. The realization sent ice through my veins. I'm coming over, Anna said before I could respond. Don't move. She arrived bearing food and that calm efficiency I'd come to depend on. She took in my appearance, still wearing the same clothes, eyes bloodshot, hands stained with pigment, and simply guided me to the couch. When did this start exactly? She asked, watching me devour the sandwich she'd brought. Few weeks ago. Getting worse. She nodded thoughtfully. We need to get you help. I don't think my therapist handles time travel. I joked weakly. Anna didn't smile. This isn't normal, Michelle. It could be neurological. I knew she was right, but the thought of medical tests, of being poked and prodded, of doctors finding something fundamentally broken in my brain, it terrified me more than the time slips themselves. Just stay, I whispered, suddenly desperate not to be alone. Please. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll call into work. That night, Anna slept on my couch while I took the bed. Every time I woke, disoriented and panicked, she was there, calmly telling me the time, the date, grounding me in reality. Something shifted between us, beyond attraction, beyond friendship. She had become my tether to the world, and I was beginning to understand just how desperately I needed one. Anna became my unofficial timekeeper. She'd text me throughout the day, call to make sure I woke up, even stop by my studio during her lunch breaks. I told myself it was just friendship. Just one woman helping another through a health crisis. But the flutter in my stomach whenever she appeared told a different story. Spring arrived in Plano, bringing fierce thunderstorms that rattled the windows of my studio. I was working on a small impressionist landscape. Nothing complex, just enough to keep my hands busy while my mind circled the same anxious thoughts. What was happening to me? Would it get worse? Would I eventually lose not just hours but days, weeks? The studio door opened, bringing with it the scent of rain and Anna's amber perfume. She shook out her umbrella, droplets scattering across the concrete floor. "Thought you might forget dinner again," she said, holding up a bag of takeout. Her black hair was damp from the rain, curling slightly around her face. "How's today been?" "Only lost about an hour this morning," I replied, setting down my brush. "Progress, I guess." She smiled, that small, careful smile that never quite reached her eyes these days. The worry was always there now, hiding behind her composed facade. I hated that I was the cause of it. We ate perched on stools at my workbench, the storm providing dramatic accompaniment to our conversation. Anna told me about a claim she was processing, a sculpture damaged during transit, the artist and gallery caught in a bitter dispute over liability. "Sometimes I think I'm on the wrong side," she confessed, pushing rice around her container. "I'm calculating what art is worth in dollars instead of." "Instead of what?" She looked up, her brown eyes meeting mine. "Instead of how it makes people feel, what it means to them." Thunder crashed outside, making me jump. Anna's hand instinctively reached for mine, steadying it on the table. Neither of us pulled away. "Tell me something good," I said, suddenly desperate to think about anything other than my broken brain, the uncertain future. "Something that makes you happy." Anna considered this, her thumb absently stroking the back of my hand. "When I was little, my grandmother had this garden. Nothing fancy, just vegetables and a few flowers. But she had this one rose bush that bloomed bright yellow. She told me that yellow roses mean joy and friendship. Every summer I'd wait for those blooms." The tenderness in her voice made my chest ache. The rain intensified, drumming against the skylights, cocooning us in a world that suddenly felt very small and intimate. "Your turn," she said softly. "This," I answered before I could stop myself. "Right now. This is good." The electricity went out with a dramatic crack of thunder, plunging the studio into shadow. The sudden darkness made everything more intense. The sound of rain, the scent of turpentine and Anna's perfume, the warmth of her hand still holding mine. "I should find some candles," I murmured, but didn't move. "Michelle," Anna's voice was barely audible above the storm. "I need to tell you something." My heart pounded. In the dim light filtering through the windows, I could just make out her face, serious and vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "Since that first day at driving school, I've felt drawn to you." I told myself it was professional interest, then friendship, beat. She paused, and I felt suspended in time, a rare moment of complete presence, no slipping, no losing track. Every second crystallized into perfect clarity. "But it's more," she finished. "And I think you feel it too." I couldn't speak. The truth of her words had lodged somewhere in my throat. Instead, I leaned forward until our foreheads touched, our breath mingling in the scant space between us. Time seemed to slow, not in the frightening way I'd been experiencing, but in a perfect suspended moment of anticipation. The rain pounded overhead as I closed the final distance between us. Her lips were soft, tasting faintly of the spicy food we'd shared. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, then deepened with a certainty that made me gasp. Her hand came up to cradle my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone with a tenderness that nearly broke me. When we finally pulled apart, the studio remained in darkness, but something had illuminated inside me, a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm scared," I admitted, still close enough to feel her breath on my lips. "Not of this. Of what's happening to me. I feel like I'm coming apart, Anna. Pieces of me slipping away." She kissed me again, briefly but firmly. "Then I'll help you collect the pieces." That night, Anna stayed again, but not on the couch. We lay facing each other in my bed, talking in whispers as the storm gradually subsided. She traced the contours of my face with gentle fingers, as if memorizing me by touch. When I started to drift off, her voice pulled me back. "I'm here," she said simply. "Right now, it's 2:17 a.m. on Thursday, and I'm here." For the first time in weeks, I slept without fear of losing myself in time. After that rainy night, Anna became my constant. My time slips continued, but her presence provided an anchor, her voice pulling me back when I drifted too far from reality. For a few precious weeks, we existed in a bubble of new love and cautious optimism. I made all my appointments. The studio ran almost smoothly. When Anna stayed over, I woke knowing exactly what day it was. But then came the Thursday, when everything accelerated. I was in the middle of cleaning brushes when the edges of my vision began to blur. Usually, my episodes felt like blinking, closing my eyes as 1 hour and opening them several later. This was different. Colors intensified, sounds distorted. The ticking of my wall clock stretched and warped. "Anna," I whispered, though she was across town at her office. I fumbled for my phone, managed to press her contact before the world tilted sideways. Then nothing. I came back to consciousness on my studio floor, disoriented and nauseated. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Anna. The date made no sense. Sunday? How could it be Sunday? I'd lost 3 days. The studio told its own story. Half-eaten food containers. Clothes I didn't remember changing into. Most disturbing of all, I'd apparently been working. The painting I'd been cleaning on Thursday was now completely restored, but with techniques I didn't recognize as my own. When Anna burst through the door minutes later, her face was tight with fear. "I've been looking everywhere," she said, dropping to her knees beside me. "You haven't answered calls, texts. I came by every day." 3 days, I whispered, voice cracking. "Anna, I lost 3 days." She helped me to the couch, her movements gentle but efficient. While I sipped water, she examined the studio, documenting what I'd apparently done during my lost time. "You've been working," she noted. "And eating. That's good, right? Your body knew what to do even if you weren't present." But we both knew it wasn't good. It was terrifying. That night at my apartment, Anna ran a bath for me, adding lavender oil to the steaming water. She helped me undress with clinical efficiency, but when I stepped into the tub, I caught her eyes lingering on my body with an expression beyond concern. "Join me," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. Hesitation flickered across her face. "Are you sure? After everything today?" "I need to feel something real," I confessed. "I need to know I'm still here." Slowly she undressed. In another context, I might have been shy, nervous. Instead, I felt a desperate hunger to connect, to ground myself in physical sensation. Anna slipped into the tub behind me, her skin warm against my back, her arms wrapping around my waist. "Talk to me," she whispered against my ear. "Stay with me." I leaned back against her chest, letting the water envelop us both. Her hands traced patterns on my skin, gentle at first, then with growing intent. When her fingers slipped lower, I gasped, the sensation sharp and vivid, anchoring me firmly in the present. "I've got you," she murmured, as I came apart in her arms. My consciousness gathered into a single, perfect point of presence. Later, tangled in my sheets, I returned her touch with equal fervor, memorizing the soft curves of her body, the sounds she made when I found exactly the right rhythm. For those precious hours, time behaved itself, moving neither too fast nor too slow, but exactly as it should. Morning brought reality crashing back. Anna had to go to work, I had commissions waiting, and somewhere inside my brain, something was still misfiring, still threatening to steal more days from me. "Move in with me," Anna said over coffee, so casually she might have been commenting on the weather. "Just until we figure this out." Pride made me hesitate. "I don't want to be a burden." Her fingers intertwined with mine. "You're not a burden, you're..." She paused, searching for words. "You're becoming essential." The raw honesty in her voice silenced my objections. The next week was a blur of boxes and arrangements. Anna's efficiency made the move almost seamless. Her apartment was smaller than mine but meticulously organized, a place for everything in its place. She cleared half her closet, rearranged her bookshelves, made space for my restoration supplies in the spare room. For a few days, the novelty kept the time slips at bay. I wrapped myself in Anna's ordered world, letting her routines structure my hours. Morning coffee together, texts at lunch, dinner preparations in her spotless kitchen, falling asleep with my head on her chest, counting her heartbeats. Then came Tuesday. I was at the grocery store staring at tomatoes when the world began to shimmer around the edges. Not now, I thought desperately. Not in public. I abandoned my cart, fumbling for my phone as I stumbled toward the exit. Anna answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" Her voice was instantly alert. "Grocery store," I managed. "It's happening again. Worse. Stay there. I'm coming." But by the time she arrived, I was gone, not physically but mentally. According to Anna's account later, I was standing perfectly still near the store entrance, eyes open but vacant. She guided me to her car, took me home, watched as I moved through the apartment like a sleepwalker. I returned to myself 26 hours later, to find Anna on the phone with a neurologist, her voice tight with urgency. "Yes, it's getting worse." "No, she can't wait another month for an appointment." Looking at her exhausted face, the dark circles under her eyes, I realized that my condition wasn't just consuming me, it was consuming her too. And no amount of love, no matter how fierce or devoted, could fix what was breaking inside me. The Venice painting was irreplaceable, an obscure but valuable piece from a rising 18th century female artist, recently rediscovered and valued at nearly $300,000. The gallery had trusted me despite my declining reputation, convinced my restoration skills outweighed the whispered concerns about my reliability. They were wrong. I was 2 hours into the delicate cleaning process when the episode hit, the worst yet. The edges of my vision didn't just blur, they fractured, splintering like broken glass. I felt my consciousness being pulled away, even as I desperately tried to set down my tools. When I came back, Anna was there, her face ashen. The painting before me was ruined, chemicals smeared across the surface, colors bleeding together in a toxic swirl. I'd apparently continued working during my fugue state, applying the wrong solvents, scrubbing too hard at the delicate pigments. "Oh God," I whispered, horror crawling up my throat. "What have I done?" Anna didn't sugarcoat it. "It's bad, Michelle." The gallery director arrived within the hour, his controlled fury more devastating than any shouting could have been. I stood silent as he photographed the damage, made calls, discussed legal options. $300,000 of history and beauty destroyed by my hands. "This ends your career," he said finally, voice cold. "You understand that?" I nodded, numb. He was right. No one would trust me again. Years of training, reputation building, passion, all erased in one catastrophic hour. After he left, I collapsed onto my stool, staring at my trembling hands. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered. "I can't keep pretending I'm functional." Anna knelt before me, taking those same destroyer's hands between her own. "This isn't your fault." Tell that to the painting, to the artist who died 200 years ago thinking her work might last. Listen to me. Anna's voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. "I handle art insurance cases every day. I know exactly how this works." She pulled out her phone, made 3 rapid-fire calls. I listened in bewilderment as she spoke in efficient insurance jargon, referencing policy numbers, liability clauses, medical conditions. "What are you doing?" I asked when she finally hung up. "Protecting you." She squeezed my hands. "The gallery's insurance will cover the damage. I've already started the documentation for a medical exemption that will prevent them from coming after you personally." "You can do that?" "I've been researching since your episode started. There are precedents for cases like yours, professionals with documented medical conditions that affected their work performance." I stared at her. This woman who had prepared for my catastrophic failure before I'd even admitted it could happen. "Why?" I whispered. Her eyes softened. "Because I love you." She said it simply, matter-of-factly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And because I believe you'll get through this." That night, we packed up my studio equipment in silence. Each brush, each tool felt like a piece of my identity being boxed away. Anna worked methodically, labeling everything with her neat handwriting, pigments, solvents, brushes, fine detail. "It's not forever," she said, taping a box closed, "just until we understand what's happening." But we both knew it might be forever. Even if my condition improved, my reputation was destroyed. No one entrusts valuable art to restorers known for unpredictable fugue states. Back at Anna's apartment, our apartment now, I supposed, I stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the sense of loss. When I emerged, Anna was waiting with a glass of wine and determined expression. "I called in sick for tomorrow," she said. "We're going to that neurologist appointment together." "It's not for 3 weeks. "Not anymore. They had a cancellation. We're going at 9 tomorrow morning." I sat beside her on the couch, overwhelmed by her efficiency, her devotion. I destroyed a painting worth more than both our annual salaries combined. I might have destroyed my entire career. "Why aren't you running for the hills?" Anna set down her wineglass and turned to face me fully. "When I was 12, my mother had a stroke. For weeks she couldn't recognize any of us. She'd look at me, her own daughter, with complete bewilderment. The doctors couldn't tell us if she'd ever come back. She took my hands, tracing the lines on my palms, but I kept talking to her, every day, telling her stories about school, about friends, and one day, she looked at me and said my name. Just like that, she was back." Anna leaned forward, pressing her forehead to mine. "The brain is mysterious, Michelle. Things break, but they can also heal. And I'm not going anywhere while we figure this out." Her kiss tasted of wine and promise. As it deepened, I felt the weight of the day's disaster temporarily lift. My hands found their way under her shirt, remembering their purpose beyond destruction. She gasped against my mouth as my fingers traced the curve of her breast, her own hands tugging at my clothes with sudden urgency. We made love with a desperate intensity, as if we could ward off tomorrow's uncertainties with the certainty of our bodies moving together. Anna whispered my name over and over, grounding me in the present moment, her fingers drawing me back from the brink of despair. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets damp with sweat and tears, I made a silent vow: whatever was happening to my brain, whatever the future held, I would fight to stay present for this, for her, for us, for these perfect moments when time behaved exactly as it should. The neurologist's office was cold and sterile, all beige walls and uncomfortable chairs. Dr. Patel, a small woman with intelligent eyes and a surprisingly warm handshake, reviewed my file with methodical precision. "Temporal disorientation," she said, marking notes as I described my episodes. "Fugue states with continued functionality but no memory retention." Anna sat beside me, occasionally filling in details I'd forgotten or hadn't been conscious for. Her hand never left mine, a warm anchor in the clinical chill. After a battery of questions, Dr. Patel leaned back in her chair. "I want to schedule an MRI and an EEG. There's a condition called transient epileptic amnesia that shares some of your symptoms. It's rare, but it affects the temporal lobe, the part of your brain that processes time perception and memory formation." "Is it treatable?" Anna asked before I could. "Often, yes. Anti-epileptic medications can be quite effective." She paused, studying my face. "But I need to be clear, diagnosis takes time. We need to rule out other possibilities: stress-induced dissociation, early-onset dementia, even certain autoimmune conditions." I swallowed hard. "And if it's not treatable? Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Dr. Patel's voice was kind but firm. "Medicine is advancing every day. Even conditions we once thought permanent often have management strategies now." We left with appointments for brain scans, blood tests, and a referral to a neuropsychologist. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me as we walked to Anna's car. "Temporal lobe," I said quietly. "The part that processes time." Anna squeezed my hand. "At least we have something to research now." Over the next 2 weeks, I became a medical test subject. My brain was scanned, my blood analyzed, my cognitive functions evaluated. Between appointments, Anna researched obsessively, printing articles about temporal lobe disorders and treatment options. "Listen to this," she'd say, reading passages about neuroplasticity and recovery rates. Her determination was contagious, making me believe there might actually be a path forward. The diagnosis came on a rainy Tuesday: focal temporal lobe epilepsy with atypical presentation. The words sounded almost beautiful, like something you might name a painting, not the reason your life was falling apart. "The good news," Dr. Patel explained, "is that we have medications specifically for this condition. The unusual aspect is the duration of your episodes. Typically these seizures are brief, but yours seem to trigger extended fugue states." "Will the medication stop those?" Anna asked. It should reduce their frequency and severity. But epilepsy management is often a process of trial and error with medications and dosages. I started lamotrigine the next day. The side effects hit immediately: dizziness, double vision, a constant metallic taste in my mouth. But I took each pill religiously, desperate for anything that might give me back control of my life. Anna took extended leave from work, using vacation days she'd been saving for years. I protested weakly, but secretly I was relieved. The medication made me so foggy I could barely function some days. "You'd do the same for me," she said simply, helping me record my symptoms in the journal Dr. Patel had recommended. 10 days into treatment, I had a breakthrough, or breakdown, depending on how you looked at it. I was trying to make breakfast, struggling with double vision, when a coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. Something inside me shattered too. I sank to the floor amid the ceramic shards and began to sob, deep, guttural cries that seemed to come from some primal place inside me. All the fear, the frustration, the loss I'd been suppressing came pouring out at once. Anna found me there, carefully swept the broken pieces away, and simply held me while I fell apart. "I hate this," I choked out between sobs. "I hate being broken." "You're not broken," she whispered fiercely. "You're fighting. There's a difference." That weekend, Anna surprised me with plans. "We're going away," she announced. "Just 2 days. No doctors, no medication journals, just us." "I can't." "You can." Dr. Patel said short breaks from stress are beneficial. I've already cleared it with her. The lake house was small but perfect. A single bedroom with windows overlooking calm water, a deck where we drank wine as the sun set. For the first time in months, I felt almost normal. That night, Anna led me to bed with deliberate intent. Her kisses were different, not careful or hesitant, but hungry. When she undressed me, there was none of the clinical efficiency I'd grown used to. This was desire, pure and uncompromising. "Tell me if you need to stop," she murmured against my throat. "Don't stop," I breathed, pulling her closer. Her hands and mouth mapped every inch of me, drawing responses I'd forgotten my body was capable of. I lost myself in her touch, not in the frightening way of my episodes, but in the glorious surrender of passion. When release finally came, it was like a reset button for my soul. Afterward, lying in her arms, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in weeks. "I want to marry you," I said into the darkness. Anna's body tensed slightly with surprise. "Michelle, not now, not until we know more about all of this." I gestured vaguely at my head. "But someday. If you can handle the uncertainty." She propped herself up on one elbow, her face visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I'm not uncertain about you, not even slightly." We made no formal promises that night, but something shifted between us, a deeper commitment than rings or ceremonies could signify. Whatever came next, we would face it together. 6 months into medication and treatment, my life had found a new rhythm. Not normal, I'd abandoned hope of returning to my old normal, but manageable. The episodes still came, but less frequently, less severely. Dr. Patel called it significant improvement. Anna called it a miracle. I called it adaptation. I'd learned to work around my condition. Anna recorded voice memos for me to play during episodes, simple instructions, reminders of where I was, what day it was, what was safe to do and what wasn't. Her voice became my navigation system through the fog. "It's Tuesday, May 17th. You're at home. There's food in the refrigerator. Don't use the stove. Don't try to drive. Call me if you need me." The recordings were practical, methodical, exactly what I needed when time slipped away from me. I couldn't return to restoration work. The risk was too great. Instead, I began teaching small workshops in basic conservation techniques, 2 hours once a week, with Anna always nearby in case an episode hit. It wasn't the career I'd planned, but it kept my hands in the work I loved. Moving in together had been our first major adaptation. Making it permanent was the next step. "I've been thinking," Anna said one evening as we washed dishes side by side. "This apartment is too small for both of us, especially with all your equipment." I tensed, wondering if this was the beginning of an end. Despite her unwavering support, part of me still waited for her to realize what she'd signed up for, a partner with a brain that couldn't be trusted. "We should buy a place," she continued, handing me a plate to dry. Something with a dedicated studio space for you, maybe outside the city, where it's quieter. The relief made me dizzy, or maybe that was the medication. You want to buy a house with me? She looked surprised by my surprise. Of course with you. Who else would color code my bookshelves and leave paint on all the towels? House hunting became our weekend activity. Anna approached it with the same meticulous attention she gave everything. Spreadsheets of properties, pros and cons lists, school district ratings despite neither of us having or wanting children. We found it on a rainy Sunday. A craftsman-style home with a converted garage that would make a perfect studio. It needed work, but the bones were good. Anna saw potential. I saw stability. We could paint the bedroom blue, she said as we walked through for the second time. That shade you like, what's it called? Cerulean twilight, I supplied. The fact that she remembered my favorite color sparked a warmth in my chest. We made an offer that afternoon. Moving day came 6 weeks later. Anna orchestrated everything with military precision, color-coded boxes, labeled furniture, an hour-by-hour schedule. My job was simple: stay present, take my medication, tell her immediately if I felt an episode coming. By evening, exhausted but accomplished, we collapsed onto our couch in our house. Anna produced a bottle of champagne from somewhere and poured 2 modest glasses. To new beginnings, she toasted. To adaptations, I countered, clinking my glass against hers. That night, I had my first dream about painting since the accident. Not restoration, but creation, colors flowing from my brush onto blank canvas. I woke with an urge I hadn't felt in months. I need supplies, I told Anna over breakfast. Canvas, paints, not restoration supplies, artist supplies. She looked up from her coffee, eyes brightening. Really? That afternoon, we filled a shopping cart with materials, acrylics, not oils, canvases, new brushes. Anna watched me with barely contained excitement as I selected colors, tested brushes against my palm. The next day, I set up a corner of the studio and began to paint. Not delicate restoration work, but bold, expressive strokes. Abstract pieces that captured the fractured way I sometimes experience time. Colors bleeding into each other, images overlapping and distorting. When Anna saw the first completed canvas, she stood silent for a long moment. It's how you see the world now, isn't it? She finally asked. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Is it too weird? It's beautiful, she said simply. It's honest. 2 weeks later, I had my first severe episode since moving. I came back to consciousness on the studio floor, surrounded by canvases I'd apparently worked on during my fugue state. Wild, chaotic paintings, disturbing but compelling. Anna had installed cameras in the studio for exactly this purpose. The footage showed me painting feverishly for hours, completely unaware but completely focused. Instead of being frightened, I felt a strange sense of discovery. It's still me, I told Anna as we reviewed the footage, even when I'm not present. Something in me still needs to create. That realization sparked the system that would eventually give me back my life. Anna helped me create visual cues around the studio, color-coded instructions for my fugue state self. Red for don't touch, yellow for safe to use, green for recommended activities. We recorded more detailed voice memos. You're having an episode, that's okay. If you want to paint, use these canvases, these colors. Stay in the studio. I'll check on you soon. Gradually, remarkably, my fugue state self began to follow the instructions. The episodes became less frightening, more like having an unpredictable roommate who occasionally borrowed my body. You're teaching yourself to be safe even when you're not conscious, Dr. Patel remarked during a checkup. It's extraordinary adaptation. I had help, I said, glancing at Anna in the waiting room. That night, overwhelmed with gratitude, I proposed again, properly this time, with a vintage emerald ring I'd found at an estate sale months ago and hidden in my paint box. You've rebuilt my world, I told her, the ring balanced on my palm. Piece by piece. Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to do the same for you? Anna's yes was whispered against my lips, her hands steady as they had always been, guiding me home. 1 year can change everything. On the anniversary of my diagnosis, Anna and I stood in the newly renovated storefront that would soon house Fragments, our joint business venture combining art restoration consulting and specialized insurance for damaged artwork. Are you sure about this? I asked, watching her measure the space for display shelving. Starting a business with someone whose brain occasionally goes on vacation without them? Anna shot me that look, the one that said she'd tolerate no self-deprecation. I'm sure about you. The rest is just logistics. And it was, somehow. My condition had stabilized with medication and management techniques. I still had episodes, probably always would, but they'd become more predictable, almost following a pattern we could anticipate. Anna had developed a sixth sense about them, often knowing one was coming before I did. Your eyes change, she'd explained once. Like you're looking at something far away, even when you're staring right at me. The business was her idea. After leaving her corporate insurance job, she'd identified a niche, specialized appraisal and coverage for damaged art that most companies deemed too risky. My expertise in restoration techniques, even if I couldn't perform them myself anymore, provided the perfect complement. We're turning your condition into our advantage, Anna had said when pitching the concept. Who better to understand damaged things than us? Now, as sunlight streamed through the large front windows, illuminating the space that would soon be filled with clients and possibilities, it felt like more than a business. It was redemption. My paintings had found an audience too. A small gallery in Austin had featured my work, both the conscious and fugue state pieces, in a show titled Temporal Disruption. The nervy, fractured quality of my unconscious work contrasted with the more deliberate pieces I created while present, telling the story of a mind existing in different time states. A critic had called it a revolutionary exploration of perception and reality. I'd called it therapy. Where should we hang your latest? Anna asked, gesturing to the canvas leaning against the wall, a commission I'd finished last week, my first major paid piece. By the consultation area, I decided. It sets the right tone. As she positioned the painting, I watched her with a familiar surge of gratitude. Anna at 30 had grown even more assured than when we'd met. Her black hair was shorter now, cut in a sleek bob that framed her face. She'd developed her own distinctive style, tailored blazers over vintage t-shirts, small emerald studs in her ears that matched her engagement ring. We'd decided to marry in the fall, a small ceremony in the garden behind our house. Dr. Patel would be there. She'd become more than a doctor over the years, something closer to a friend. A few clients from my workshops, Anna's former colleagues who'd supported her career change. A gathering of people who understood that love means adaptation. Michelle? Anna's voice pulled me back to the present. Where'd you go? Nowhere, I assured her. Just thinking about how far we've come. She crossed the room and took my hands, a habit she'd developed to ground me when my thoughts drifted. Regrets? Not a single one. I meant it. Despite everything, the lost career, the medical bills, the uncertainty that still shadowed our future, I wouldn't trade the life we'd built. That evening, we established a new ritual, one that would carry us through the years ahead. Sitting on our porch swing, watching the sun set over our small backyard, we took turns counting the day's blessings. I'm grateful for the contractor finishing on time, Anna began. I'm grateful for new brushes, I continued. For that Thai place that delivers. For my medication working. Back and forth, building a foundation of gratitude beneath our feet, creating stability in a world that had taught us how quickly everything could change. I'm grateful for driving school, Anna said softly, a reference to our beginning that made me smile. I'm grateful for time, I finished, leaning my head against her shoulder. And that was the greatest surprise of all. My broken relationship with time, the thing that had nearly destroyed my life, had ultimately become my teacher. Every preserved moment with Anna was precious precisely because I knew how easily moments could slip away. Every hour of clarity was a gift. Every day we successfully navigated together was a victory. In the morning, I'd wake beside her and go through my daily checklist, name, date, medication, plans for the day. Anna would kiss me before leaving for her run, and I'd start coffee, set up my easel, prepare for whatever the day might bring. Sometimes I'd still lose hours. Sometimes my hands would create things my conscious mind didn't direct. Sometimes Anna would come home to find me confused about how long she'd been gone. But always, she would take my hands and bring me back to myself. Count with me, she'd say, and together we'd find 5 things to see, 4 to touch, 3 to hear, 2 to smell, 1 to taste. A sensory map leading home. This was love as I'd never imagined it, Not the cinematic passion of my younger fantasies, but something steadier, more enduring. Love as a practice of patience. Love as a daily choice to stay, to adapt, to find new paths forward when the old ones disappear. Ready to go home? Anna asked now, locking the shop door behind us. I am home, I replied, taking her hand. Wherever you are.